Hi, I'm Louis Falgu, and welcome to Essentials. Today I'm reviewing Slint's seminal 1991 album, Spiderland. Now, this album is very difficult to classify. It almost defies genre explanation. You could call it post-rock, you could call it post-hardcore, but I think probably the best descriptor is math rock. I mean, either way, it would have been a very early contender in any of those genres, so it's going to sound different than what they evolved into. Regardless, this album has undeniably had massive influence on all three of those genres, so whichever one you choose to call it doesn't really matter. Now, in many ways, it's kind of amazing that Spiderland is as well-known as it is. This was the second album by Slint. They disbanded immediately after, and the only way this album probably managed to live on was from the underground hype that kept building until eventually, when these genres became more popular, people recognized this album more than they probably once did. But I think ultimately this album deserves its recognition one way or the other. It doesn't matter how it came about, I'm glad it did, because Spiderland is incredible. This is definitely one of those albums with a certain emotional quality that feels very much unique. I guess the best way I can describe the sort of vibe of this album is dread. And that's not to say you're going to be dreading the listening experience, but if you listen to the album, I don't think it's inappropriate to say it exudes dread. It just drips dread from every note. The opening track, Breadcrumb Trail, is fucking perfect in every way. It opens the album off with these sort of like twinkling guitar notes. It feels very, very pleasant. But as soon as the spoken word vocals come in, this instrumental gets tainted. It no longer feels pleasant. It feels very mysterious. And he begins just telling this story of being at a fair or perhaps a theme park or something like that. Something with a roller coaster, I don't know, you pick it. And what's so great is that the music follows this story. Once they get onto the roller coaster and they take the first drop, you get this absolutely enormous guitar chords that just bust in. As he starts singing, creeping up into the sky, it feels like the music is doing the exact same thing. I almost feel like if you don't ever want to go on a roller coaster in your life, you can just listen to Breadcrumb Trail and you'll get a similar experience. Now, as for what the lyrics of this song mean, it's kind of hard to tell. I mean, they could definitely just be literal. It could, and it sounds almost as if it is. They're certainly spoken in such a way where applying a metaphorical meaning to it almost feels inaccurate. Because the story is fairly straightforward. The only thing that throws a wrench into it is this stuff about the fortune teller, which very much feels, not so literal, not so real. He almost injects this sort of like mystical element into this story, which would otherwise be fairly benign. As benign as going on a roller coaster can be. But I think this track just has such an incredible dynamic range. And it's a great opener for that reason, because very much this album continues in this vein through every song. You know, the difference between the verses and the chorus here is day and night. And I just love how this riff plods along so slowly. It makes it feel so heavy. But I just think all around, Breadcrumb Trail is a phenomenal work. And then the next song, Nosferatu Man, is a little more straightforward, I would say. That's about as straightforward as this very skippy and stilted groove can give you. And I think this is a good place to shout out the drumming here too, because it's really what holds a lot of this album together. Nosferatu Man in the verses has very, like I said, very stilted time signature. It's playing in a very, I would almost say awkward time signature, but the drumming, like, it connects everything, and it makes the groove feel very grounded. It doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like you have to keep retuning yourself to follow where the riff is going, if that makes any sense. But this song very much does sort of tell the story of a Nosferatu man who turns into a bat and is a vampire. Yeah, if you're not already catching on, lyrically this album is very diverse. But what I love in these verses here is that very squealy, high-pitched guitar line that comes in every now and again, and it's so eerie. And once again, I gotta commend the dynamic shift from verse to chorus here. This is such an exhilarating chorus. I just love the guitar tone. It's so gritty and heavy. And then track 3 happens, and the pacing and tone of this album just suddenly shifts. This song contains no drums. In fact, the vast majority of this song just contains a very slowly strummed guitar. The note patterns will change from section to section, but it never gets busy at all. And this song is the most accurate musical depiction of social anxiety that I've ever heard. And that's because there is nothing grandiose or self-important about the way that this story is presented. It's incredibly real, to the point where it's very difficult, for me at least, to listen to, because it really puts me in that anxious mindset that I don't exactly enjoy being in. So it really is just the story of Don, who stepped outside, and he goes to a party where he feels so isolated. And all it takes for him to feel this way is to look at other people speaking to each other. Nothing happens to him. There's no big event that makes it, very clear to somebody who doesn't understand or has never experienced social anxiety to really grasp. There's nothing there. He's just at a party looking at other people talking. And he has to go to the bathroom and stare in the mirror to collect himself. He has to go outside to catch air. And while this is going on, the music is perfectly replicating this dread. Yeah, I said that this album exudes and drips dread. I think that's really shown off on this track. And the song is so patient. It takes its time. It's very, very slow. It doesn't really build at all. That being said, there is payoff. When the guitar distortion gets turned up, it feels much more electric heavy for a good period of time here. And this happens right after our protagonist here begins driving home, which makes this fucking part, it really captures that feeling. It's such an intense moment. And all it is what? He's driving home and he feels self-pity. That's all that's really going on. Which is, once again, what's so genius about this song. Like I said, there's nothing self-important about it. It is such a real depiction. But it does end with some actually kind of happy resolution in an odd way, where he kind of realizes it's time to fix himself and it's time to change things, and that's where the song leaves off. That being said, it doesn't feel happy. There's no instrumental payoff here that makes you feel like, yeah, we've really gone somewhere. So it's really up to you to interpret whether or not he's actually going to make this change or whether the cycle's just going to repeat itself. Now the next song, Washer, is the longest song here. And this song, it's so pathetic. And I don't mean the song itself. I don't mean like that as a critical descriptor. I mean that in the way that these lyrics are sung, this guy feels like such a pleading mess after this, what I assume is a breakup, or at least a breakup that's about to happen. He sings this in such this pathetic voice, wash yourself in your tears. And I'm not trying to mock him. I think it works wonderfully. I think it puts you in this position, and I think it makes you sympathize with this guy in a way that not many songs like this can, because you almost know that this was a sort of once-in-a-lifetime thing for him here. And that's not to say anything of the music, which is absolutely phenomenal as always. The line that I mentioned, wash yourself in your tears, that line sort of plays with the guitar melody here, which kind of feels like you're washing yourself in your tears. It's so sad, and it's just so effective. I think that this melody on this song is it's beautiful. It really is beautiful. But dreadful as always. And once again, this song really takes its time, but it also has a lot of dynamic shifts where the song gets so quiet that depending on what listening environment you're in, you may not even be able to hear it. Multiple times the song just gives out to this incredibly quiet guitar strum that sounds like it's about to build to something, and it just keeps not doing that. Until at one point around the 7-minute mark, it finally gives way. And then these massive guitar chords, much like on Breadcrumb Trail, super heavy, super thick, just wash over you. You get this brief guitar solo here too, very brief, but it is such an exciting payoff to this song. And then on track 5, we get For Dinner, which is definitely the weakest link here. I don't know how many people would argue with that, but it is a very effective instrumental interlude. Once again demonstrating the album's dynamic range, although this track stays very quiet for the vast majority of its runtime. It builds so subtly, and then it'll just sort of stop building and go quiet again. There's only like one point in this song where it ever really boils over near like the midway point, and it only lasts for what, like 5 or 6 seconds. And the word that comes to mind again, dread. This track, you really feel it. If you just sort of pay attention to it and listen to the notes and the melodies being played here, it's very, very subtle, but yes, very dreadful. And then finally, as if this album hasn't delivered enough songs that are out of this fucking world, we get the best song here and the closing track, Good Morning Captain. Holy fucking shit. This song, it's absolutely, utterly, in all ways, depressing. So this song tells the story of a ship that is sinking as the captain is essentially going down with his ship. Much like on Nosferatu Man, the groove here is so stilted with the drums really holding it together. Drumming on this track is phenomenal, by the way. But I'd say that this riff is much more strange than the one on Nosferatu Man. There is something that feels so panicked about it. It really matches the feeling of, I don't know, being on a ship when you know you're about to die. You know, I guess I can't say that for certain because I've personally never been in that situation, but much like on Washer, this groove will often give out these very quiet sections, although this time they always pay off with these very, very long and deep guitar chords. And then the song will just get right back into it. Now, the spoken word performance here is especially great because he definitely manages to carry this feeling. He's so emotive in the way that he tells this story, and it does feel very much hopeless. And I think much has been said at this point, and rightfully so, about the way that this album ends, the way this track ends as well. So the captain finds this little boy behind a door, and he tries to reach out to this boy, but it's hopeless. The water is presumably rising to neck level at this point, I would assume. You know they're both going to die. And the captain then says, as the groove cuts out for a moment, I'm sorry and I miss you. And at this point, we get that long drawn-out guitar chord again, while he keeps saying, I'm sorry. He keeps saying that. He sounds so done. You know, the hope is lost at this point. Completely lost. There were points earlier in the song where you did feel like he was attempting to do things to try to fix the situation, but at this point it's far too late. And then on the album's heaviest moment, and also very much the album's last moment, which I think is brilliant, he begins screaming, I miss you, with so much emotional intensity. This part of the album is just devastating, and it's so draining. But the riff here is so goddamn heavy. This is just, it is the biggest outpouring of this album's tone you could have had, as the album was previously constantly delivering dread. And of course it got heavy at many points, but that feeling never left, and this is what it's all been building up to. It is so effective. And as far as some of the most headbanging moments in music go, I would definitely rank this one up there, although you'll be headbanging while you are bawling your eyes out. You know, you'll be washing yourself in your tears. And that's it. The album really does have a very concise track listing at just 6 tracks. They're all fairly long, but the album stays under 40 minutes, which I think is great. I love how concise this album is. It is not difficult to just put on and listen to, and it delivers every single time. You know, I don't want to scare you away with the way I've been describing this album as being, you know, as exuding dread, because like I said earlier, I don't think the listening experience is dreadful. There is a lot of entertainment to get out of this. A lot of great riffs, a lot of really heavy moments that have these great builds. They always pay off, and really interesting drum grooves and time signatures that, you know, never go overboard or get too indulgent. In many ways, this is a confounding album. One of the reasons why I've held off so long to review this when I've been meaning to for a long time now is just because I don't and I still do struggle to find words to describe it. And that's the highest praise I can really give it. It's absolutely worth a listen, and it is an absolute essential that every music fan should hear. So that does it for this episode of Essentials. Like always, if you have some essential classic albums that are your favorites and you would like me to review, you can leave them in the comment section and I will be sure to consider them. I've got a few albums I definitely want to get around to, but I won't be listing them out because I don't know the order in which I will. I would like to do these Essentials videos more often, but I'm very lazy, so hopefully I can start kind of getting on that. But bye, guys.